So joining me on the call today, I've got Peter Taitoko from RMR Process. Pete, welcome to the call.
Thank you, David. Nice to be here.
So the topic for today is we're really talking about the Australian industrial sector and what's been going on in that sector, especially like since COVID, there's been a lot of pressure on our economy. And I know that you're heavily involved, so maybe give us a sense of what your business does and what space you play in.
Thanks, David. Yes, so RMR Process, we specifically operate in the food manufacturing industry in Australia. So assisting anywhere from small startups to multinationals in the food manufacturing space. So almost every aisle that you walk down in the supermarket that has a food product on, we've designed or built a process and or factory to be able to manufacture those. So probably 30 plus years in the industry, starting up in multinationals, working around the world and what have you. And then RMR Process was born out of that to go and assist, the small to mid-tier manufacturers as well.
So tell me about what you're seeing with the Australian economy right now. There's some massive changes going on. How's it impacting the food industry?
It's huge, but huge in the sense that there are just so many unknowns out there. Yes, there's a squeeze. Cost of goods has gone up significantly. And that's part of that, I guess. My view is that's probably possibly our own doing, in the sense that for many, many years now in food manufacturing, we've tended to import a lot of ingredients to try and remain competitive to service our two major retailers. So that's sort of, there's an area, when we look at the negatives, I guess, that's going on in the industry at the moment, there are also some positives in the sense that there are opportunities out there to start turning some of these concepts around of where we're importing and where we're exporting.
So I know you're a bit of a visionary in this space because, when we talk about food manufacture, it's not new, right? It's been around forever. And this pressure to import ingredients from overseas because they're so much cheaper, and even the labor overseas is so much cheaper. Where does Australia fit in terms of how this is all rolling out?
Australia could be self-sustainable in its own right. It could be a superpower in its own right when it comes to food manufacturing and food security. But yeah, unfortunately, we've become very good at exporting our commodities and then importing those commodities back as a value-added product. And I think we can just change with mindset alone and find ways to do it. I think that what we went through with the pandemic is actually going to help us in the long run, because it has by default turned some of that around, where we've had to come back and start looking about how we can produce goods onshore and rely less on the global supply chain. So I think, moving forward, the opportunities are definitely to be getting stronger at value adding in Australia and looking to export to countries that need our products.
So can you give me like an example of how people are sort of cutting through this? Because to me, I find it like it's almost an unscalable wall. How do you compete against price competitive commoditized products that are coming in from overseas and cheap labor?
Yeah, the cheap labor, I believe, and I'm quite open about this, that when people talk about, and even the government talk about, we've got to compete with cheap labor overseas for manufacturing. I don't believe that's actually as big an issue as people do believe it is. If you look to China, for example, and again, specifically in food manufacturing, they're as good as automating as anyone else in the world, and they import from all over the world, automation from Europe and the US to their factories. They don't have that. They don't have as many people in their factories as what we would tend to have in our factories. So the labor cost is not really what kills us. What we believe it is the capital cost to establish the manufacturing in Australia in the first instance. And so, we've got so many examples of what we do where, projects have been killed because they can't get an ROI on their capital investment to be able to establish manufacturing in Australia. So we have got companies that have said, well, we'll leave our products to be, continue to be manufactured in Southeast Asia, for example, because we can't afford to bring manufacturing back to Australia.
Yep.
So I guess the challenge is then saying, well, what does that mean? Like, how can we make it affordable to bring it back to Australia? And once you work out a way to make that happen and get it back here, for example, again, construction cost is just, out of control.
Yep.
So why do we want to build a new factory when we can probably go and find an older shed and get it fitted out to be a perfectly good world-class food manufacturing facility for a fraction of the price? So it's looking at things a different way and just being a little bit smarter about how we can establish the manufacturing here in the first instance. And then, what level of automation do we need to go to minimize our labor costs? But everywhere you look, you're sort of running into headwinds to try and achieve that, because you're against construction companies, the government really, they'll fund projects that are creating labor, whereas we say, what if you were funding a project that was creating a mini economy in a regional location? So there's a bunch of moving parts there that I just think that there are opportunities sitting there now. You look at the bigger markets, growth markets overseas, like Middle East, for example, there's a lot of opportunities. Middle East, India is now taking off. It'll head very soon, if not already, to where China was 20, 30 years ago.
Yep.
Some parts of Africa, there's just massive opportunities for exporting Australian products.
But really, I suppose what you touched on there was just asking a better question. And really, there is a place for Australian manufacture and export. And it's not to do with labor costs, and it's not to do with, the raw material cost. Is literally about being smarter in how we create factories and how we process food,
Yeah, exactly. And also, we've become quite myopic in Australia about, we think if you've got a contract with one or both of the major, retailers, that's it. You've achieved what you set out to achieve. And a lot of companies have been very successful in doing that.
Yeah.
But to think that's the only option is where you need to change your thinking, because there are so many more options where you're not going to get belted on margin. You're not going to get forced to have to, say, import cheaper foreign ingredients to keep your cost of goods down and what have you. There are, again, if I go back to the Middle East, there are markets out there that actually don't care what they pay for a quality Australian product.
Yeah, right.
There are companies in Australia right now that almost fly under the radar that are exporting high quality Australian products at large scale, large volume into Asia and the Middle East and Europe and the US.
Yeah, interesting. So really, you've talked about almost the turning of the tables, because we always saw ourselves as non-competitive in a global market because of these low-cost resources. But the truth of the matter is we have a high-value product here in Australia that some of the rest of the world actually are willing to pay premium for.
Yeah, a lot of companies don't know this. We have customers that say it's just all too difficult to export.
Yeah.
As I say, what's difficult about producing your goods, putting them into a container, getting the money dropped into your bank account before that container leaves your site? Right, rather than have to get told that if that pallet turns up at the supermarket 2 hours late, there's going to be a sort of a cross next to your name, and by the way, we're going to use that against you next time we go into negotiation for margin. So they're extreme examples, right? But this exists. This is going on right now. And the other thing is knowing what your market is. And again, in food manufacturing, we've got probably, and they might be extreme examples, but we'd have small startups coming to us, say, hey, we want to build a small factory. We've made this, for example, a baklava product that all our family and friends reckon this is the best they've ever had. Okay, so what's your market? Is it just your family and friends, or where are you heading with this? And they can't really answer the question. And then the other end of the scale is a customer of ours that's built. He's now Australia's largest dairy dessert manufacturer. He started saying, my nonna's rice pudding recipe is the best I ever tasted. He went looking to see what his market was and realized no one was making it in Western Sydney. And there was a huge demand for it.
Interesting.
And so that's where he started, but continued to evolve by asking the questioners about what else is missing in the market that I could be making out of the same facility today. And today he's doing, protein desserts, right? Which was a first here as well, as far as the scale and volume at which he does. So always looking for, what is the market looking for that I know how to make something that the market wants.
Right.
So understanding what that is. And if you look beyond our shores, you will find that there are markets out there that people want our products.
Yeah, fantastic. So, look, we are running an event called Australian Industrial Success Stories, and I know that we've asked you to share some of these case studies and just give people a sense of what can actually happen in Australia for the industrial sector to actually thrive. So can you just tell me about some of the key elements you might be covering on the day?
Yeah, I think again, it's about the opportunities that exist at the moment.
Yep.
You know, in tough economic times, and it's fair to say we're in it. There are always opportunities, and again, it's often a good time to reset or rethink or redefine what it is that your core business actually does, and how do we strengthen our position? How do we do that together? How do we build teams around us that might bring fresh ideas to the table? But there's a key element that's coming our way that also needs to be discussed and highlighted, which we won't touch on too much, but it's worth people starting to think about how the carbon emissions decarbonisation is coming our way via the Paris Agreement that's been signed in the nationally determined contribution schemes that the government signed up for, because it's going to hit manufacturing pretty hard in the next few years. But again, if we start getting our heads around it now, we can get a significant foothold in the global market. And I will challenge people to go away and have a bit of a look at what this means. And then we can touch on some of the opportunities that exist with exporting our goods to overseas markets.
Yeah, fantastic. Pete, thanks so much for the preview today. Looking forward to the actual event, because I know you're a wealth of knowledge. You've been doing this for a long time and you're actually in the trenches with all of these manufacturers. So appreciate your time today.
Thanks, David. I look forward to it.